Hello, welcome to my channel. My name is Nairi and I've got two adopted sons and we've had them for quite a long time. So we adopted them when they were 7 and 8, but we were foster parents to them when they were 2 and 3. So today I want to talk about letterbox contact and maybe just some tips and advice, based on my own experience, and that's all I can talk from, about the things to think about, what you're going to put in your letters and things you might want to think about around this. So letterbox contact is indirect contact by letter. Often the court will suggest a kind of regular letterbox contact, a letter. In our case, it was twice a year that it was suggested. Now, I want to just put this out here now, and somebody might say, well, you're wrong, Nairi. There might be a social worker out there that says you're wrong, Nairi, but my understanding is that even though it's recommended by the court, it cannot be enforced. So if you really don't want to do it, you don't legally have to, is my understanding, okay? And that might be wrong, but you're strongly advised to do it because obviously it's giving the birth family some sort of information about the children, and it's keeping an open dialogue between you and the birth family, and that has seemed to be important. Particularly later in life, I think that is really where it comes into it, that your children then realise that you have actually kept up some contact with the birth family, and then when children get older, become more curious, whether that be teenage years or adult years, they do have the letters there, and they do have some information, extra information about the birth family. All right, so that's the baseline there. Now, in our situation, when the boys were fostered, the parental contact did drop off really, really quickly, the visits, and there was no opportunity to properly meet with birth family to get information for the boys. You normally have an opportunity to meet with the birth family before the adoption takes place. But in our situation, obviously, we were fostering and then we were adopting from fostering, even though that wasn't originally the plan. That's what ended up happening because they went up for adoption and that broke down. So we then adopted them. That's another story. Check out my channel. The boys, as foster boys, had a lot less contact with family than normally happens. So we hadn't done any contact with family. And then when we were adopted, the first contact that we were ever going to have, we'd met the parents in contact when it was going through court, but then it all stopped. So the first real information that went backwards and forwards was when we adopted. And that was quite a few years later when we started the letters. So my experience of this hasn't been too bad. I'm going to say it hasn't been too bad. But our experience is we're not writing to the parents. We're writing to grandparents. And those grandparents do have, involvement in the family. Not with our boys, but have involvement with the family. So it's one step removed for us, which I think in our situation is probably a good thing because of the family history and how our boys still feel about, and how vulnerable our boys still are and how non-resilient they've always been. It's probably best that it's this way. We have had one letter from the mother, which we were advised by social workers we didn't have to share with the boys because it didn't follow their protocol, because it was very direct. It was talking about meeting up with the boys and it was quite emotional. So we didn't have to share it, but we did. They never tracked down where the father was, so we've never had that. We've never had contact with the father. So most of the letters are going backwards and forwards with the grandparents. Now, in the beginning, I didn't find it too difficult to do. I felt like I wanted them to know that everything was all right. We were able to share bits and bobs about the boys, and they were sharing back some of their family news, and it wasn't too bad. But I found, personally, twice a year was quite a lot. Not because I resented doing it, but I found there wasn't too much that I could really put in those letters that was different and new and interesting. And one of the things I would suggest to you is when you kind of start writing your letters is be quite methodical about the areas that you want to cover. So talk about, whether the child is well. We'll say child rather than children. For us it's two, but talk about whether the child's well. talk about how they're getting on at school, talk about hobbies that they have, talk about new interests they have, talk about behaviour if you want to, but you really do need to be sort of quite methodical about it. Sorry about my husband going backwards and forwards, because actually it's quite difficult. You can't really write in loads of detail. You can't give away where you're living, you can't name places, you can't name people. And so when you start to write a letter with just lots of things that you cannot do in that letter, you can sit there halfway through and think, I don't know what to write now. I really don't know what to write now. We've never been told we can't do this, but again, it might be different in your area. If the boys have a problem, a major problem, I do include that in the letter. So for example, one of our boys we had to take out of school, I included that in the letter. So I try to balance it with all the positives, because there's loads of things, nice things I can write about, but I also balance it with if they've got behaviour issues and things like that. I balance that, I put it in. I don't make the whole letter positive and I don't make the whole letter negative, because life is mixed. And I don't want to give them a false sense of, oh, everything's rosy, but I don't want to give them like loads of negatives. So they're reading the letter and they're like, oh, this is sad. Yeah, I don't want to make them feel sad that the boys are not making progress or anything. I don't do this, but I recommend you do, is to kind of like look back on each letter and see where you left off. But I must admit, I don't do that, but I would recommend you do, because again, you don't want to repeat yourself too much. You do want to give fresh and interesting letters and information. In the beginning we just kept going, but the reason why we kind of like held off a little bit, because we weren't getting any letters back, and that's tough. So if you're regularly writing twice a year but you're not getting anything back, that's very difficult, because you've got nothing to interact back with. Whereas when they write back to you in your letter, you can mention some of the things that they've mentioned as well, which really, really helps. So there was a gap of time, and when that gap of time happens, I held off the letters a bit. I'm not sure whether I missed more than a year, possibly not, but I certainly wasn't doing twice a year. And then the letters started up from them again, so it was a little bit, more fluid. But it's settled down at about once a year, I'm going to say, even though the recommendation for us was twice a year. Occasionally, I think there's something really big and interesting I want to share with them, and I think they feel the same. They've obviously go through a lot in their lives, so I think the times when they're going through a lot, they hold back, and then we might get a letter where they sort of share quite a bit. And I feel that the relationship in those letters has deepened and been pretty effective. And I think when the boys look back on the letters, they'll learn a lot about their family from those letters. I mean, we've shared them with them. So this is the other thing. You have a choice whether you do that or not. You do not have to share the letters with your children. You don't have to do that. Now, our boys have always known that they've been adopted, so it's no big secret, okay? And I will look at how they are. So if they're going through a really turbulent time, very stressed, if you look back at my videos, we've had loads of issues with the boys. So if they're very turbulent at the time, I won't share the letter with them right away. I'll wait until they're settled and share, and then I'll wait for a reaction, and I'll make sure I'm there for them. They don't normally react right away, but the next day they probably do. Next couple of days we see a reaction, and I think that's normal, because it rakes up a whole load of stuff. For any adopted child, it rakes up so much for them. So I think you can expect some sort of reaction when you share the letters. I think that would be normal for that to happen. You might see your child go really quiet, very contemplative. And I think it's important after a while, you go back and say, do you want to ask any questions? And you will be amazed at the questions that you get asked. They're not the questions that you're going to think that you're going to get asked, okay? Occasionally from the letters, we've then very much had, oh, I want to see my family now. Only the younger one does that, not the older one. Oh, I really want to see them. Oh, this one. And you have to wait. We went back to the social workers and said, the young one's asking to see them. And they said, wait a bit. because, you know, it might be a bit of a shock that this letter's come in from this certain person. Wait and see, and if they keep asking, we'll arrange it for you. And it dropped off. So sometimes you'll get like you know, quite a drastic reaction, but you've got to wait for things to settle. What else have I got to say? Just be careful you don't put any identifying information in there. Hopefully your social workers will screen through it and wouldn't send that out anyway. And yeah, I mean, I would recommend, if you can, continue to do it fairly regularly, then do, because actually, you know, it just leaves less unanswered questions for your children later. So I hope that helps you. If you've got any questions on that, any other subjects around that type of thing, please do put them in the chat. I'm always open to video ideas. I can think of things to talk about, I can think of video ideas, but when it comes from you guys, then you know, it's exciting to do it for you. So we have some members on the channel. Check out membership if you want to, and also subscribe, and I'll see you on Fly Little Birds. Thank you.